Hi guys, in this video, I will recap new film for you. Film name will be in description. Before we start, please like this video. On a stormy night in a small rural town in Maine, a tree suddenly crashes into a house. The next morning, an illustrator surveys the aftermath of an unusual electrical storm. An old tree fell through his window, and his son Billy alerts David and his wife to the damage at their lake house as well. The family observes a thick mist descending from the mountain, which David finds strange even after the storm. Deciding to discuss the fallen tree with a neighbor, David approaches Norton, despite their past conflicts. Norton is struggling with his chainsaw when David informs him about the tree and notices the damage to Norton's car. Norton asks David for a favor, requesting that he accompany him to town for repair supplies. David agrees, hoping to improve their relationship. David, Billy, and Norton drive to town, encountering army repair vehicles. Norton recognizes them as soldiers from a nearby military base working on the Arrowhead project. He asks David if he knows about the project, and David mentions rumors ranging from alien ships to supernatural creatures. At the store, David talks to employees Sally and Weeks, who are busy with many customers. Norton thanks David, and Billy asks if he and Norton have reconciled. David says it's too early to tell, but they're at least being civil. A group of soldiers enters the store, excited about an upcoming vacation. One shares a smile with Sally before greeting Mrs. Irene Repler, who chats with Billy about the storm's damage to the town. While Irene talks, David notices a woman, Amanda, who smiles at him. Norton observes a military police officer entering the store to speak with the soldiers. The police and fire sirens speed through the town, and the officer orders the soldiers to cancel their vacations and return to base immediately. The store goes silent as the military base sirens blare. A man with a bleeding nose runs into the store, screaming about creatures in the mist that took his friend. Weeks tries to calm him, but he insists on closing the store doors. A shopper runs to his car, but the mist envelopes him, and only his screams are heard. The rest of the shoppers stare out the store window, unable to see anything. When mysterious tremors shake the store, the manager urges everyone to stay put, but a woman insists on going home to her children. Mrs. Carmody declares the mist is death, a sign of the apocalypse. Later, David finds Mrs. Irene, who introduces Amanda, helping Billy feel comfortable. Weeks tells David where to find blankets in the loading dock. David goes to the loading dock and discovers the store generator is malfunctioning. As he walks through the darkness, a noise from the back door grows louder. David runs back, frightened, and informs Weeks and some others. They all go to investigate, with Jim handing out flashlights and Norm joining them. They find something blocking the generator's exhaust and plan to clear it from outside. Mist creeps in, but Jim and Norm insist on proceeding, annoyed by David's caution. David defends his concern for everyone's safety, but Jim angrily dismisses it. As the rolling doors open, Norm prepares to go outside. The mist thickens, and everyone mocks David for fearing it. Suddenly, a giant tentacle emerges, wrapping around Norm's foot and pulling him. David tries to save Norm, but the others are paralyzed with fear. More tentacles appear as Weeks rushes for an axe. The tentacles tear at Norm, revealing claws that wound him, ripping his flesh. Weeks attempts to cut the tentacle, but Norm is dragged away before he can strike. Norm clings on, but David and Weeks have to let go as more tentacles appear. Weeks closes the door as David fights off the tentacles, cutting one with the axe just as the door shuts. David attacks Jim, blaming him for Norm's death, but Weeks intervenes. They regroup inside the store to decide how to inform everyone. David talks to Norton, who doesn't believe him. David invites Norton to the loading dock to see the tentacle in Norm's blood, but Norton becomes defensive, suspecting an ambush. As the commotion draws attention, David explains what happened, but no one believes him. Eventually, he convinces the manager and another man to check the loading dock, where they see bloodstains and a severed tentacle that evaporates. They return to confirm David's story. Some shoppers help block the windows, but Norton remains skeptical, thinking the scene is a trick. He tries to persuade others to leave with him. while Mrs. Carmody preaches that the mist is God's wrath and demands a blood sacrifice. Weeks threatens Mrs. Carmody to stop scaring people. Billy overhears the soldiers talking, but is reassured by David. Billy is worried about his mother, but David promises they will return to her. David discusses making torches, and Amanda reveals she has a gun, handing it to Weeks, an experienced shooter. A disagreement arises when Norton and a small group decide to leave. David warns them against it, but Norton insists that leaving is the best option, convinced the mist poses no danger. David suggests one person tie a rope around their waist to retrieve a shotgun from a car. A motorcyclist volunteers and exits with Norton's group. David holds the rope until it's suddenly pulled violently. It takes 3 men to hold it, and when they finally pull it back, only the lower half of the motorcyclist remains. Jim and Myron adjust the lights, connecting them to batteries for emergency use if anything enters the store. Later, a massive creature appears at the window, attracting more creatures. David realizes the lights are drawing them in, and Jim and Myron scramble to turn them off, inadvertently worsening the situation. The window shatters, and the creatures enter. David lights a mop as an improvised torch, fighting off the creatures. Others are injured or killed, but David and the group manage to kill several creatures using fire. With Weeks' help, David saves his son, and the group covers the hole in the window. Tom returns briefly, but someone remarks that Mrs. Carmody's premonition was correct. David leaves Billy with Amanda and checks on the others with Weeks. Amanda sees a woman taking sleeping pills to escape the horrors she witnessed. David discusses the possibility of leaving the store, recognizing that it's no longer safe. They plan to gather supplies at the nearby pharmacy before fleeing in David's car. Some survivors agree, but Amanda fears the mist extends further than they think. David acknowledges the risk but worries more about Mrs. Carmody's growing influence and how it might worsen the group's paranoia. Amanda argues that people won't resort to such extremes, but David points out that fear can drive desperate actions. Billy, scared of losing his father, is comforted by David's promise to return. Mrs. Carmody tries to stop the group, predicting that going to the pharmacy will bring God's wrath. Soldier Wayne Jessup joins the group, leaving the others behind. They reach the pharmacy and find enough supplies, but also encounter spider webs and people cocooned within them. One of the trapped people suddenly grabs Jim, revealing himself as the military police officer. He apologizes, saying it's his fault, before convulsing and releasing spiders from his body. Jim is attacked by a giant spider, and Weeks shoots it, but more spiders appear, launching acid webs that burn one man's leg. The military officer's body explodes, releasing more spiders. The group retreats, leaving some behind. They return to the supermarket, terrified and injured. David comforts Billy, who is still shaken. The next day, David sees Mrs. Carmody preaching to a larger crowd, who now treat her as a prophet. Weeks warns David that Carmody has become influential, and even Jim seems convinced by her. David's group remains determined to leave and questions Wayne about the mist, remembering the military officer's apology at the pharmacy. Wayne denies knowledge, but the group notices the absence of 2 soldiers. They find the soldiers' bodies in the loading dock, realizing they took their lives after hearing the officer's confession. Wayne admits the soldiers were likely involved in a secret project that caused the mist. Jim drags Wayne to the crowd, who attack him, believing he caused the mist. Carmody incites the crowd, calling Wayne a blasphemer and demanding he be sacrificed. The crowd throws Wayne outside, where he's taken by a massive creature. David consoles Billy, promising never to leave him. The next day, David's group prepares to leave, but Carmody blocks them, declaring them sinners. She orders her followers to sacrifice Billy first. Surrounded, David's group fights back, and Weeks shoots Carmody, allowing them to escape. They run to David's car, but only Amanda, Billy, Irene, and Dan make it. The others are attacked by spiders and left behind. David grabs Weeks' gun and drives away, passing the remaining survivors who watch them leave. At home, David finds his wife dead, wrapped in a spider cocoon, but decides to keep driving for Billy's safety. They encounter destruction and a giant creature as they drive until they run out of fuel. David, hopeless, discovers there are only 4 bullets left for the 5 passengers. He makes the tragic decision to end their suffering. Afterward, David steps out into the mist, expecting to die, but instead, he sees an armored tank. The mist lifts as a military convoy arrives, rescuing survivors and destroying the remaining creatures. David falls to his knees, devastated, realizing that if he had waited just a little longer, everyone could have been saved. That is all, guys. Thank you for watching this video. Please do not forget like this video, write comments below about this movie, and for more, please subscribe my channel. This will motivate me for new videos.